I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show, we have this super inspiring Shane Feldman, somebody who makes me feel really badly about myself, not because he's an evil or bad person. He's actually a really wonderful, nice guy, but because he's accomplished so much in his life so far. He's only 24 years old, I think, or 24, 25, and he's done so much. It's incredible. It's like, holy, I can't believe I haven't done nearly as much as him. But then I check myself too, and I realize, no, it's not a competition on who can do the most in their life, but he also did just travel around the world. So you're going to hear about this. He wanted to take a year off to go explore the world. He has this incredible movement, Count Me In, that he's established that's inspiring young people, especially all over the world. So we get into that. We talk about his mission now as a public speaker. He's also with Speaker Spotlight, the agency that represents me exclusively in Canada. And he's just such an all-around inspiring guy. So I think you'll take a lot from our conversation as you hear about his journey and about his messages. I think it's really important, especially for workplaces as well, to get some new blood and to get a younger voice in to give some feedback and some advice and guidance on how to be a more mentally healthy workplace and how to create leaders in that. So I really enjoyed our conversation. I think you will too. Here's my conversation on So-Called Normal with Shane Feldman.
I help organizations and companies create a sense of community so that they can expedite and maximize their impact and help their employees, their team feel a deeper sense of culture and connection to their brand.
What do you mean by community?
Community, I define as meaningful connections. So, we talk a lot about leadership. We talk a lot about, activating the leader within our teams, our employees, and C-suite. And to me, there can be no leadership without community, without those meaningful connections, the social capital that forms a web of connection between all of us as social beings.
Yeah. So why are you a good person to do that? What brings you to this work?
Because I ran an organization for a long time that celebrated community while dealing with the existential crisis of not actually feeling a sense of community myself.
Interesting.
So my story really begins back in high school, where I started in a new school, in a new community, didn't know anyone, felt deeply lost and a deep-rooted sense of loneliness. And I went to a school counselor to try and transfer because, of course, like every teenager who knows everything, I figured the school was the problem. I must have landed in the worst high school in Canada, in the world. Maybe transferring to a new school will just fix everything. So I went to my school counselor, tried to get that transfer. And essentially, before he would even entertain the idea, he helped me identify a handful of clubs and councils and school initiatives that matched my interests.
Had you been involved in anything before
Nothing. I was not involved. I was, I probably felt like an outsider because I was acting like an outsider.
Right.
So he helped me through the motions of signing up, introduced me to, the producer of the school radio and the head of the tech crew and the photography club. And I started signing up. And quickly I started realizing, I was meeting people. I was talking to people in the halls. I was making some friends. I didn't have 8 best friends after week 2, but I had a few people to talk to and have lunch with. And I realized how many students weren't involved in anything. And I realized, okay, what if we started some kind of school event or project where students can actually come together, where we can connect them with local opportunities and clubs and councils, kind of like my counselor, Mr. Conte, helped me do. So what started as a small school project to impact 30 kids in my school quickly became a community initiative that, in year 1, we had 386 students join in. Year 2 was 1,000 students and then a couple thousand. And, by year 5, we had millions of students in over 100 countries around the world taking part in what had become this grassroots global movement, celebrating community, helping students find their tribe. And at the same time, all I'm thinking in the back of my mind day in and day out is that I don't know who I am. I don't know who my community is. I don't have my tribe. I have no sense of belonging. I'm putting on this brave front as the CEO of this now global organization, and I don't even know who I am as a human being, let alone who my people are.
Right. And do you think you were investing so much energy, even from those earliest days, to try to find that, but then started to lose yourself in it?
I thought I was at the beginning. Like I thought I knew what community was. I thought I had figured out because I was involved, right? I was signing up. I was checking off all those check boxes and I was surrounded by people all the time. But I'm sure you know the feeling of, sitting in a room that's filled with 1,000 people and feeling entirely alone.
Yeah.
And for me, most days felt a lot like that. Even if I was out for lunch with people or, sitting in an office, I just felt lonely. I just felt disconnected and very isolated and scared a lot of the time. And for me, I started to realize that a little bit and just kind of kept tucking it away into the back of my mind until back in 2015, I experienced a complete relationship breakdown in my life, where in the span of just a few months, I ended a toxic romantic relationship. And as if that wasn't enough, what really broke me was a legal battle with my former best friend. And my whole life just seemed to turn upside down in an instant. And so I knew I needed to kind of get away to find myself and to reset. So I got a plane ticket and flew to Asia, as one does.
Why Asia? What
I needed something that was so different than what I had experienced to that point. And I just figured that was different enough, different culture, different language, different architecture, different surroundings. I just needed as much different as possible. I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was going to find. I just knew deep down I needed something different. So I went, and that first plane ticket turned into a journey through 20 countries where I started to accidentally uncover what community really was at its core, how communities tick, what makes them thrive, how people connect, and all the deep-rooted importance of meaningful connection.
Yeah. So where would you go when you would go to these countries, presumably not speaking the language, not knowing anybody there? Or was it a little bit more planned than that? Did you have connections?
Absolutely no plan. I went in to most places with, my first plane ticket, and sometimes there is somewhere booked for the first night, and then I figured it out as I went. And I'd meet new people each day, and I'd spend a lot of time in small local places. So, when I was traveling in Vietnam, it wasn't so much time in Ho Chi Minh City. It was time in the outskirts of the suburbs in northern Hanoi. When I was in West Africa, I didn't go to Accra, the capital of Ghana. I went to Adaklu Dewanu, a remote village that's 3 hours in the back of a pickup truck to get to. And that's where I really started to realize how people connect when you aren't in a major city, what the differences are, and most importantly, what the commonalities are. Because what I realized at the core is that what everyone wants, what everyone needs, regardless of your circumstances, your socioeconomical background, your social status, what everyone wants and needs is to be seen, to be heard, and to feel like they matter.
And this is what you would do when you would come into these communities, not knowing people, is try to see them and learn from them, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a research project. It wasn't like I went to, write a book about community. That wasn't my intention when I went. It was really just to find myself. And that in the process, I started to realize I was uncovering all these truths. And for many of these situations, it wasn't until months or sometimes years later that I start to realize, oh my goodness, this is what happened. When I was in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, at dusk on New Year's Eve, walking into the main square, ready to enjoy the fireworks and music on my own, I was looking forward to the night. I was just looking to relax and have some fun and see how locals in this part of the world celebrate New Year's Eve. What happened that night was that I was, found my place in the square to take in the fireworks and the music. And there was this group of 20 and 30 somethings just next to me, laughing and talking, getting ready to enjoy the show as well. And I realized in my peripherals that they had started talking about me, even though I really didn't speak Vietnamese much at that point. I could just tell that they were talking about me. When people are talking about you.
Usually when they're pointing and looking.
They're pointing and laughing. And so I felt a tap on my right shoulder, and I turned, and the entire group is standing there staring at me, which is a little creepy.
Sure.
But then one of them pointed and said, "Alone?" And I smiled and nodded and said, "Yes." And she smiled and shook her head no and said, "No." And she grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the group. Wow. And for the rest of the night, we celebrated New Year's together. Mind you, we spoke very little because of the language barrier, but we were laughing and dancing. And my entire experience changed. Even though I was in the same square, I was physically just a few steps away from where I was before. And I didn't even realize I was lonely before. I thought I was happy. I thought I was, feeling excited to take in this show, to watch the fireworks, to listen to music.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized, looking back at that experience, what changed is that I went from being isolated to sharing experience with others. What I was doing initially was going through the motions of a one-dimensional experience. When I was pulled into that group, suddenly everything became three-dimensional.
Right.
And life is meant to be a +1 experience, which isn't so much about having a date to your cousin's wedding as much as it is about making sure that you are immersing yourself in other groups. Mind you, this is coming from an introvert. I'm wildly introverted myself.
It's funny you mentioned that.
But we all need connection. It doesn't matter how introverted you are. I mean, I definitely recharge on my own. I need my time alone in my room reading a good book. But at the same time, we all, regardless of how extroverted or introverted you are, we all crave meaningful connection.
So, speaking from one introvert to another in that case, and when those experiences would happen, a complete stranger comes over, pops into your little bubble. There you are alone in the middle of Ho Chi Minh Square. Weren't you afraid? Weren't you thinking to yourself, I don't want to go join these people. I'm just here alone being an introvert. Didn't you have any hesitation in any of these experiences?
Fear and hesitation? Sure. It was definitely a conscious choice, as I think it always is, to tuck my fear aside. And my dear friend, Michelle Poehler, has helped me train myself to always ask the question, instead of what's the worst that can happen, the question should be what's the best that can happen. And that's the reason why I've jumped out of planes and gone skydiving. It's why I'm able to buy that ticket to travel around the world, because I know that there are rewards and benefits to be found.
Yeah.
And for me, looking back on my life, those things never happened when I'm in solitude or alone.
Right.
They never do.
Yeah.
Everything is about connection. When we find ourselves, when we find and tap into the best parts of ourselves, it's because we're connecting with others. When we are able to reach new impact at an organization or reach new sales levels at a company, it's because we're connecting with others in a meaningful way, whether it's with colleagues or whether it's with customers, right?
Yeah.
We are social beings. We need to connect. We desperately need to connect. And especially now in this age of social media, so much of us are going through the motions of falsifying connection day in and day out, instead of actually driving true connection, focusing on meaningful connection with our friends, with our neighbors, with our colleagues and family.
Yeah.
We're so plugged in online, but we're so unplugged in community. So when someone taps on my shoulder, I value that. I see that as an incredible opportunity to connect with another human being.
Yeah.
And now that gets me excited. Before, sure, it may have been more hesitation. I may have had to push myself a little further. But now, I mean, the stats in my own life, the experiences speak for themselves, where that is where I've gotten the most joy. That's where I have seen the most exciting opportunities flourish when I'm experiencing those connections.
You've almost trained yourself into it, it sounds like, to overcome that, whatever barrier might have been there to begin with. Through exposure, you just keep doing it over and over again.
That courage is a practice.
Right.
It's a conscious choice that I make every single day. And for many people, it takes courage just to get out of bed in the morning. And that certainly used to be me, just to roll out of bed and start my day. It takes a lot. You need to first see value in yourself before others can see value in you.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I hear from people all the time who are still so stuck. And I've been there certainly many times, so stuck in that cave that you just don't see, is it worth the effort? And sometimes, unfortunately, tragically, I think too many times, people are convinced that there's nothing beyond that cave, that there's nothing beyond that fear and hesitation. But it sounds like you had the bravery to explore beyond that anyway, not even sure what was going to happen.
It's interesting what happens when you feel like you've hit rock bottom and then you take a little, plastic spoon and you keep digging and then you find a new bottom. And to me, there was nowhere that I could have gone that was worse than where I was.
Right.
So what did I have to lose? When a relationship breakdown happens like that, when you feel so isolated and so alone, you don't see the point in rolling out of bed. Why not? Is kind of the question that kept appearing in my mind. What could possibly happen that's worse than this? I feel a tornado in my stomach. I feel like there's this 1,000-pound weight dragging me into bed, trying to convince me to stay under the covers day in and day out. If this might change that even 1%, I may as well do it, right?
Not that diagnostic labels are necessary or anything, but were you depressed?
Not clinically. Not clinically. All I knew at the time was that I felt deeply lonely, deeply isolated, and and completely disconnected
Yeah.
from the world, from other people, and from myself.
Yeah. If you could name one, or point to one of the deepest experiences that you had traveling these 20 countries all over the world, what would it have been?
Well, one of the most interesting to me was when I was in France. So I landed in France, and most people when they picture France, they might picture the Eiffel Tower or the striking Arc de Triomphe or the Louvre. And for me, when I landed, the first place that I went to, my first stop on the Grand Paris tour, was a McDonald's. Not because I was craving a Big Mac, but because I had to pee.
Right.
And what I learned really quickly while traveling was that I had to kind of have this internal GPS or radar for restrooms because I have the bladder of a child. It's really important to know where to go to relieve yourself. So for me, it was McDonald's was going to be my closest bet. So I walked in McDonald's first stop when I landed in Paris, and it was just after 9 a.m. and I walk in and the street's bustling outside. It's a busy local part of the city. The McDonald's is empty, like deserted, which I've never experienced back home. I've never seen that in a single McDonald's in North America. Inevitably, even if it's 3 a.m., someone's going to be in there ordering 20 McNuggets. It's the way it works. But here it was empty. So I was deeply confused. I was so stunned I forgot I had to pee. And I go up to the counter and I try and ask, why is it empty? And the person behind the counter says, come back at lunch break, come back at noon. So I went on my day and I started to realize as I was walking around, it's kind of like the food theme continued. I realized that nobody on the streets was holding a coffee or eating a croissant. And it took that experience for me to realize that back home, someone's always carrying something, and almost always it's a food or beverage. I'd say 3/4 of the people I pass by on a busy street in New York or Atlanta, Toronto, Vancouver, any major city, even small cities around North America, someone's always eating or drinking something. It's what we do. And France certainly wasn't the case. And I came to know that they have maintained this ritual of eating at specific times of day, and it's a communal activity. They celebrate savoring food together. So I returned to that McDonald's later that day, and it was like an entirely different place. It was completely packed. The second I opened the door, the crowds of laughter and conversation were like a warm hug. And I walked in, and there were groups of people around every single table. I couldn't find a single person eating alone. No one was grabbing a burger and taking it out to their car. Everyone was laughing and talking, passing around food, all different generations. I imagine that might be like, what it may have been like in Toronto or New York in the 70s. But now, there aren't big family or friend meals out in even fast food restaurants. And it was just an incredible celebration of food. And 80% of people in France celebrate food together, have their meals together.
Now, is that you think a cultural expectation, or?
It has been. So that's a cultural part of being French, of being in France, of being a local. That's what they have done forever. It's traditional. And even with youth culture, millennial culture, fast food culture seeping its way into the country out there, they still maintain that, right? And McDonald's is a perfect example. Even though it's there, you'll find nearly 200 24-hour McDonald's just in Manhattan. In France, guess how many 24-hour McDonald's there are?
I have no idea.
There's not a single one.
Really?
In all of Paris, not a single 24-hour, because it would be empty, just like how just after 9 a.m. there was no one in there, maybe a few trickle in, but come noon, it's packed. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So then in your work with companies, to jump ahead a little bit, how do you help them to build that kind of culture if this is something so foreign here?
Leadership starts with listening. So regardless of where you are in an organization, whether you're the CEO, a manager, a frontline employee working at a call center, it doesn't matter. You have the opportunity to activate the leader in yourself and activate the leader in others around you when you are listening, when you're showing up and helping others be seen, others feel heard, and others feel a sense of value. Because it's what we all want, right? And you have the opportunity to help others feel those things. So it's driving that meaningful connection. It's helping you realize that every choice you make, every action you take every single day is an opportunity to activate that leadership potential within you and others. Leadership is not about the corner office. It's not about a fancy title. It's nothing more or less than 10 seconds of extraordinary listening. That's all it takes to be a leader today. Leadership is 10 seconds of extraordinary listening.
What kind of impact does that have on people if you take that 10 seconds of great, extraordinary listening?
Well, it changes everything. Think about the last time you were deeply listened to for 10 seconds. Sadly, it doesn't happen often.
No.
So when you have that, when you have that true connection, similar to the way business used to be built on handshakes, which build integrity, they build trust. When you listen to someone deeply, you're building a sense of value, architecting a sense of value within them, right? Empowering them to feel like their voice has value, that their voice matters. Some of our greatest expansions and developments of Count Me In have been from frontline employees or interns who have ideas, who actually feel empowered to share those ideas. Right. So think about how many ideas we're missing out on in companies, organizations around the world, because people have these ideas, but they don't feel like they have value. Yeah. They think, who am I? I'm just the custodian. I'm just the janitor. And then, you look at companies like Frito-Lay, who celebrate their frontline employees, who help all their employees around the world know that they have value. And that is how the hot Cheeto came into existence. The hot Cheeto was invented by a janitor in a small plant in California because he had an idea. The factory had a minor breakdown. So there were a bunch of Cheetos that came out without the bright yellow cheese sauce on it. And this janitor took a few home and sprinkled some of his homemade spice on it, which his parents had done when he was a kid, with corn. And he shared it with friends and family. Everyone loved it. So he called up the CEO of Frito-Lay at the time and shared what he had done. The CEO gave him the time of day, then visited the plant a couple weeks later, asked this janitor to give a pitch for the product, and now it's one of the most successful products in their line.
I just had a bag yesterday.
There you go.
Although in Canada they only have the milder version of the hot Cheetos.
Well, we're just not prepared, I guess, for the full fledged.
Because there's like a full on. I think it's called like XXX hot Cheetos.
Yeah, no, Canada's not ready for that.
No.
Maybe in the winter, where we need to warm up. But
so tell me a little bit more about. You mentioned Count Me In. What is that? How have you scaled it? What are the objectives?
Well, Count Me In started as that small school project back in high school. Now it's the largest youth-led organization in the world. So we're just over 10 million people strong in 104 countries. And the entire idea is helping students connect with themselves and their community in a meaningful way. Yeah. So what started as kind of hand-holding, helping students find the right volunteer opportunities in their local communities, is now a lot more about training and mentorship around social entrepreneurship, what it looks like to actually connect with yourself and your community in a meaningful way. When I came back from this 20-country journey, I came back with a renewed sense of identity and a renewed sense of purpose when it came to Count Me In. And jumping back into action there, we stopped doing our broadcasts. We stopped doing any events that had more than 1,000 people in attendance, and focused on our more intimate programs, on school tours, on camp programming, and really doing things that celebrated leadership development focused on community building. And so now Count Me In is very much back to our roots of celebrating community and helping students find their tribes and build their tribes.
Yeah. How long were you traveling for?
I feel like I haven't stopped. I'm still traveling.
Well, on your self-discovery tour of the world.
Self-discovery.
Yeah.
Those first 267 flights were 267 flights were spread across a couple of years.
Wow. That's extraordinary. So how did your organization continue to operate with you having your Shane Feldman world tour? Have you built a team around it? Does the leadership really live in the communities where they own it themselves? How does that look?
So our team now is 50 people strong, spread across 3 countries. Wow. I have a remarkable team, and it was really more of a reset. When I left, I didn't unplug entirely, for a couple of years. So there were definitely systems in place for the organization to continue without, my CEO hat on 24/7. Right.
Well, and I ask because, there's lots of leadership people out there who, as the old saying goes, those who can't do, teach. That there's lots of people out there who are the only show, they're the only part of their operation. But that you were able to build something that could go on without you, I think speaks to your own leadership as well, your own leadership style, to trust your team.
My first mentor in the for-purpose corporate space was Adam Braun, who founded Pencils of Promise around the same time that I started Count Me In.
Mm-hmm.
The difference being that he had more than a decade of professional experience on me. It's coming from Bain & Company, and I was still a high school student at the time.
Right.
So I saw an amazing mentor in him. And one of the first pieces of advice that Adam gave me, one of the first times that we met up, was that I had to check 3 things off a list as quickly as possible. The first was to get an assistant so I could focus on the things that I really need to be focusing on and have someone else deal with the more mundane tasks that I shouldn't be spending my time on. The second was to get myself on some kind of sustainable income. And the third was to get Count Me into a place where I could take a sabbatical, step away, and have it run without me. Mm-hmm. The first 2 I checked off right away. The third one took a few years, but getting Count Me into the place of sustainability has been one of the greatest gifts I've given myself and that I've given the organization.
Yeah.
Because now Count Me In's at a place where it is self-sustaining. We have this incredible team, all the systems and protocols in place for it to run on its own. And Count Me In is far bigger than I am. Mm. And every organization, large or small, should be larger than their CEO, larger than their founder. And I was definitely, it was a challenge getting Count Me into that place, but it's the greatest thing that I've ever done.
So how do you, because that seems like a fine balance to me between not just you, but your leadership team, everybody in your organization. How do you include them and their personality and their individuality as a key part of the organization while also making it not personality dependent on everybody who comes through, and, to make it so that the organization is bigger, I guess, than the constituent parts, but that the constituent parts are still a really important part of that?
One of the biggest changes that we implemented right away when I came back from this journey of self-discovery and Count Me In discovery was reaffirming and rearticulating Count Me In's core values. And now part of our hiring and recruitment process is entirely built upon our values as an organization. If someone doesn't have a personal set of values that are aligned with the organization values, we know that we're not a fit for one another. Right. Even if you're the most skilled IT person in the world, even if you are wildly passionate about student development or leadership, if your values are not aligned with our organizational values, it's just not going to work out. Right. And we know that. So when we were able to really distill that down, it became far less about personality and entirely about values.
That's extraordinary.
And it also ends up becoming a fantastic practice for our team, because sometimes, when you get to that application process, you haven't really thought about what your values are as a person. Right? Many of us don't have values, that we wake up and every day we ask ourselves, okay, what are the core values that I'm going to make sure I act by and act through today? And that's something that we encourage all of our team members to do, and something that most of them naturally do, which is why they work for us in the first place.
Right. So how do you keep your organization, but also yourself, on check with those values? Do you have to remind yourself? Do you have to check in with yourself every now and then to make sure things are
not every now and then, every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I mean, personally, at the very least, every morning and every evening, I check in with myself. And for our team, along with our 8 core values as an organization, we have an activation statement and a reflective question. So the activation statement is meant to kind of invigorate that value into your day. So it's something that perhaps you'll ask yourself or remind yourself in the morning. And the reflective question is more of an evening ritual or an end of the workday ritual where you ask yourself, did I actually do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So what are those kinds of questions, or what's an example of those kinds of questions?
For example, if we're talking about growth, which is one of Count Me In's core values, the activation statement would be, I celebrate the growth and development of others, right? The reflective question might be, how did I increase the development of others today, right? So simple. These aren't rocket science, right? Where we're talking about building alignment and just making sure that values are an everyday part of your life.
Yeah. And it sounds like the type of model too that you could apply just to individual personal development beyond, not everybody's going to be the CEO of a massive organization, right? But that said, I think you can still apply many of these principles to yourself as an individual. That's what you've been doing for the last however many years.
Sure. You're the CEO of your own life.
Right.
That's the greatest company you'll ever run.
Right. Yeah. So what would you tell your high school self the day before he was about to go in and talk to that guidance counselor about wanting to switch schools?
Now, this is where I, jump into my good, crazy brain of, well, I wouldn't want to go change anything because I'm so happy where I am now. And obviously all those things, happened in the right timing. Going back, the number one thing that I feel I needed to hear that most people probably need to hear is your life is greater than any one moment. I think so many times, especially younger people, but what are 28 or 48-year-olds, if not just overgrown 15-year-olds? Right. I think whatever we all need to hear is that your life is greater than any one moment, because so many times something goes wrong at work or at family. You have an argument with your spouse or your child or your mom or your dad, and it feels like your world is crashing down on you. Yeah. And your life is bigger than that one moment. It is. And the second you realize that, suddenly it's way easier to apologize. It's easier to forgive. It's easier to focus on things outside of yourself and that immediate moment. And that takes a real intentionality, a real mindfulness practice for you to just kind of step outside of that moment and give yourself permission to transcend it, right? Yeah. To say, okay, it's okay. This might be a huge sucker punch. This might be really painful right now, but you know what? My life is bigger than this moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I find, I've been talking about this for years, that when people find themselves in these kinds of crises, whatever they are, if it's a mental health crisis or a life crisis or just a really bad day, that it has this way of collapsing in on itself, that it'll keep losing air. It'll keep suffocating you until you reinflate it or escape it or break out or something.
Sure. And we're our own worst critics. So usually we do the exact opposite. We tell ourselves, your entire life is riding on this moment. This is everything. You ruined everything. You're the worst. Go hide in your room and never leave, right?
Right.
And if we just flip that conversation on its head, think about how motivating that is as a concept. When we tell ourselves, it's not the end of the world. This isn't everything. Yeah. Right? It's one moment.
Yeah. That takes a lot of, I think, trust in some ways. And I think that's why people who get through these things are so brave, why I think they're so brave, because that's just about the scariest thing in the world, is to do something that you have no idea. Your brain, your mind, everything about you is telling you not to do anything other than what you're doing, despite the fact that it's causing you so much harm and pain, but that you choose to do it anyway, having no idea what's going to happen. Do you think you would have learned to do that had you not struggled the way that you did?
No, I don't think I would have. And I was so focused on distracting myself instead of actually doing the work that I don't know if I was learning anything at all until I really experienced that complete relationship breakdown. There were so many instances throughout my childhood, my young adult life, where things were going wrong and I just tried to distract myself, whether it was earlier days dealing with parents' divorce or a challenging relationship with my father, to running an organization, dealing with the challenges involved in that, from legal and accounting to just everyday operations. There were so many situations where all I wanted to do was distract myself from how I was really feeling and just get through. Right. Just get through and pack that away.
And this is so interesting because I think that people who have become very successful or come out the other side of struggle, very often people who are still struggling, and I've been guilty of thinking this of others, and I think people have thought this of me, that somehow they're a unicorn, somehow they're different from everybody else. They have the secret knowledge or skill set or something that I don't have and that I will never have. But that's not the case, of course, that anybody can have access, it sounds like, to the kinds of experiences and revelations that you've experienced.
I believe everyone has access to whatever they need, but it's whether they choose to act on it and whether they see it. So I consider myself a catalyst when I am on a stage speaking at a conference or when I'm working with a company, right? I don't have the ability to walk through a door for someone else. What I can do is turn on the light so they can see the door in the first place. Right. A lot of people don't realize that door is right in front of them because it's too dark. They need someone else to flip on that light so they can see the opportunity in front of them. Yeah. Then it's up to them to do the work to get through that door. And sometimes it takes days, weeks, years to take those steps over the threshold. Yeah. Yeah. But at least you know it's there, right? When you see the door there, the light's on, that's where you start feeling a renewed sense of self-empowerment. That's where you feel new energy to work towards it, even though you know it's a journey ahead of you. Yeah. even if it takes you 267 flights, you see that there's something there that you're working towards.
Let's talk shop a little for about speaking, since you brought it up a little bit. So I've got this guilty pleasure of what I like to call motivational bullshit. Your types of people whose sole purpose with zero shame is to go in there and pump people up, to motivate them, to get them to activate themselves, we call it raising awareness. You're not sure how deep it's going. It's not doing the work, but in some ways, it's superficially turning on the lights. It's getting people aware. It's getting people to do something. It doesn't last forever, though. And what you have to back it up with is all this other stuff. But I think that motivational bullshit stuff has a bad reputation, that people feel like, I think sometimes, that they just want to skip right to the work without necessarily getting the motivation to do the work to begin with. In your experience, doing both, it sounds like, getting people pumped up, which I love to do, but then also giving them the tools to follow that up and to actually make meaningful change. Where do you think the majority of the need is? Is it that people need help getting out of bed in the morning, or that they just don't know what to do when they get out of bed in the morning? Where do you think the most need
Yes,
is?
the answer is yes.
To both. Yeah, to both.
It's a balance, right? Yeah. So if I've gotten on stage and I have motivated you for 60 minutes, I have failed. I should not be picking up a paycheck, and I should not be doing the work that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I want to motivate you to then, in that 60 minutes, to realize that you have 60 years of work ahead of you to go put this into action every single day when you wake up. Yeah. So if I'm not giving you the strategic turnkey solutions to start implementing right away, then I have not earned a space in front of you on that stage in that moment. Yeah. Right? There are a lot of people out there that call themselves motivational speakers, that are speaking at these large conferences that run their own seminars, right? Yeah. And it's great, right? Power to you. That's not my scene. That's not my crowd. Yeah. To me, when I've been in those scenes and crowds, I tend to see the same people there every single time. Yeah. And I call them motivator junkies, right? Yeah. You just go from room to room because you like the energy, you like being surrounded by those people, but you're not actually doing anything. Right. In many cases, you're in the same place that you were a year or a decade ago, even though you're going to those seminars every week or every month. Yeah,
getting that hit of
spending
dopamine,
all your money on those books and on those DVDs or digital downloads, whatever it is. And that's never been me, because for me, I know that I leave with a sense of lack. I always do, until I actually start doing the work and putting that work into action in my everyday life. Nothing's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So the 60 minutes on stage is almost a byproduct of the 60 years of impact you're going to see in your organization, in your family, in your friendships, and all your relationships following that speech. Right? Yeah. That's why I love to speak. Like I said, I think I'm more of a catalyst than a speaker. I get to create that spark, I get to turn on that light, and then help you know how to step over that threshold, how to take your next steps, what those steps are, so you can actually see the changes in your life, in your world.
Does that look different for everybody after they hear you speak, what they go out and do in the next session, the next day? What does that look like?
Yes, it looks and feels different to everyone, because of course we're all different. We're 8 billion people with 8 billion different perspectives and ways of life. But the starting point is always the same. We're talking about meaningful connection. This isn't rocket science. Look at France, right? We're talking about eating together, right? There's one thing you can do. You don't need to be C-suite to do that, right? You can be anyone in an organization, find somewhere communal to have a lunch, either on the premises or at a restaurant close by, or do a potluck. It doesn't matter. Send an email invite out to the team and see who wants to join you, right? Hey, and if you're a CEO and you want to have lunch with your team, great, fantastic. But however it organically grows, anyone has the opportunity to create that first conscious choice to do that, to spark that change, to start building those meaningful connections. It can be adding one additional question when you're on the phone in that call center with that disturbed or confused or upset customer, right? Mm-hmm. Or you simply ask them how their day is going, what you can do to make their day a little bit better. Right? What's going on in their life? Just helping them realize that you see them as a real human being. Yeah. Because if we lose sight of our humanity, we have nothing.
In that example that you just gave, I think people all the time get stuck on protocol. That's not on my script. That's not, or I feel too anxious to go, and say something unexpected like that. How do they overcome that, or should they overcome that? What does how do you build that into the business process to be human like that?
I think it starts by asking yourself, what would you want if you were on the other end of that? Right? Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate things. If you were on the other side and you were really frustrated with this vacuum that just is not working, that you just spent your $500 of hard-earned money on, and you're calling the support line, what would you want to hear? You want someone that's going to listen to you, who's going to allow you to be frustrated, who's going to apologize and take ownership, or even if you're just in some call center in New Brunswick, doesn't matter, right? You give that person time and space to feel the way that they're feeling. And by practicing empathy, you're actually climbing down into the hole with them, right? You're not saying things like, oh, it could always be worse, right? You could, live here where I'm under 30 feet of snow, right? You're there. Yes, I hear you. That must be really frustrating, right? Especially if you have people coming over for dinner tonight, you want your floor cleaned. Yeah. Let me get this sorted right away for you because you deserve a clean floor, you deserve a clean life, and I want to do everything I can to make that work for you, right? It's probably the same thing that the protocol says, right? You probably want to make the customer happy. You give them a new vacuum, whatever it is. But the way in which you say it has the opportunity to recognize the humanity in someone else. That builds connection. It builds trust. And it's going to create more loyalty in that person because they don't feel like some number on a call list. They don't feel like, okay, well, he's just going to press a button in a second and go on to the next caller. Right. You're giving individualized attention and you're recognizing the humanity in someone else. Again, this isn't rocket science. Right. This is what we all want. It's what we all need. It's like your fourth grade teacher who said, go eat lunch with a new kid. Right. Or when your family sat down to dinner when you were a kid and all ate together and actually had conversation.
In my experience, there are people who fall back on protocol and policy and or that kind of rigidity. They tend to be afraid of something, whatever it is, that they don't know how, they don't have the skills, they don't have the training, they're afraid of what the response might be. There's some reason that they're that shut down. I think a lot of people experience that. So how do you get beyond that fear then to show them that this is okay? I mean, you did it by flying all over the world, but not everybody is going to be able to have that opportunity. So what are some practical steps that people can use to push past their own fear in that way?
Talk less and listen more. For many of us, we have a fear rooted in, what if I say something wrong? What if I do something wrong? Or I just don't know what to say, right? I have no idea what to say in this moment. That's terrifying. What if it's all the what ifs, right? The less you talk, the more you listen, you'll actually be building a deeper relationship, a deeper connection with the person on the other end of that conversation. And at the same time, you're in a lower risk situation, right? Because the less you do, the less you could get in trouble
you
for.
You don't have to fill as much air. Yeah.
No, it's fairly simple, right? And that's why I said before, leadership is 10 seconds of extraordinary listening. Yeah. It's not 10 seconds of extraordinary talking. You don't need to be Shakespeare, right? Don't go focus on, what Will was writing or, you just want to listen to people. Yeah. You just want to listen.
Now, you didn't realize how powerful your own experience overseas was until later, you said, until you were reflecting on it later. What about the people who say, in the moment, this all sounds great as we're talking about it right now or as you're planning it abstractly, but in the moment, you're in the office, you tell somebody, hey, that pizza party, that email, that one-liner, whatever, on the bigger scheme of things adds up into something really special. But in that moment, they say, this doesn't matter. I don't have time for this. This is bullshit. This doesn't change anything. Is that a mindset thing? Is that a being more mindful to the broader impact of your small everyday interactions? How do you set that in context for people?
It is. It's also science, right? It's also math. If you look at a business plan, you could have a 3-year plan for your business to scale. You can have a 3-year connection plan too. It's not as concrete, but you'll start to see that connections multiply and they end up enhancing the trust within an organization, the loyalty, there's better communication. There's, companies that have a rich sense of community experience 48% less mistakes or accidents. They have an increase in employee cooperation with one another and collaborative leadership. So the science is there. The studies are there across hundreds of companies, hundreds of case studies now, thanks to Gallup and some other organizations. We know that community actually offers tangible impact to organizations. We need it. It's the bedrock. It's the foundation. We talk about leadership. We talk about cooperation. We talk about all these things. You can't have any of those things without first discussing community, before first focusing on connection with one another and with yourself.
Yeah. And what about the? I'm throwing all the objections at you to see.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Keep them coming.
What about the investment? People, companies, especially very traditional or conservative companies that haven't yet caught the wave of generally speaking, mental health awareness, because I think this falls at least partially into that bucket. Those companies, those leaders especially, who look at the costs associated with this and say that it's too much, or that they're not getting the return for it.
Sure. Well, the best part is that there isn't any crazy overhead with focusing on meaningful connection. There really isn't. If anything, you're going back to the beginning. You're scaling back some training and saying, hey, remember that you're a human being. Remember that we deal with human beings. Because at the end of the day, name one company for me that doesn't in some way focus on human beings.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's what's, we work, even if it's for pet food, you're okay, are you marketing to the dog or to the dog's owner? So regardless of who you are, who you work for, where you are in the world, humans are at the center of your organization. But so many organizations have forgot that.
Yeah.
We throw that to the side, and you focus on the bottom line and reaching the next quota, and we lose sight of the humanity.
Yeah.
And when we start bringing the humanity back into focus, everything else is going to flourish. Everything else is going to thrive, because we thrive best at our greatest capacity as human beings when we connect with others, because we're social beings. It's in our DNA. It has been forever. It's how our brains are wired. We need social connection. And when we celebrate that, when we make opportunities for that, everything else is 10x'd in the process. And that's not about scheduling, your laser tag team building or your escape room or even bringing the entire team out to a paid dinner. That's not what it is. Right? This isn't about your social activities calendar. It's about the everyday moment-to-moment choices to connect with others, creating spaces where we know that connection is celebrated, where we want to look up from our desks and our phones and we celebrate that. Something simple, like how Loblaw, one of the largest retailers in North America now, not only encourages but celebrates all of their employees eating lunch together each and every day. That didn't take a massive investment. Then they went one step further and hosted free barbecues in all of their stores for their customers, right? Because they want their customers to eat together too. But of course, that goes along with their brand promise. But just something like officially encouraging your employees to eat lunch together, that takes a huge step in the right direction.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And maintaining that vision on the bigger picture and what the true impact of all of that really is.
And it starts with a memo. It doesn't start with a $10 million investment in infrastructure, right?
Is this something actually then that the leadership should initiate, or that is better from the grassroots growing up? What's the best route to make something like this happen?
I've seen success from either way, which is amazing, because it doesn't matter, if you're a CEO right now listening, a manager, or a frontline employee. You have the opportunity to positively impact all those around you, all those that you interact with every single day.
Yeah.
Right? It's your opportunity to unleash the greatest leadership potential in you, to tap into your full capacity. And the number of people you want to impact, that's really the only thing that can change, right? If you're a frontline employee that only interacts with 16 people every single day, great. You'll impact those 16 people.
Yeah.
And those 16 people might impact another 16. And who knows, if you're the CEO of a company of 500,000 employees, well, you can snap your fingers and start to really help those 500,000 people feel valued, feel heard and seen. I was working with Disney, and I was actually underneath the Magic Kingdom in Florida at Disney World. It was phenomenal, although still have culture shock from seeing the Little Mermaid in a t-shirt and jeans. That was weird. But I looked over at the wall in one of the hallways underground in their employee area, and it was a note from the president and a direct phone number. And I asked one of the executives that I was with what was with this poster, and he explained that any employee, regardless of their level at Disney, has a direct line to leave a voicemail anytime, and the president will actually get back in touch with them. And they all know, everyone at Disney knows that they're valued members of the organization. That's huge. That's massive and so important. And do you think he's flooded with voicemails every single day? No, he's not.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? But they know it's an option.
Yeah.
And they know that whenever it comes down to it, they will be seen, they will be heard, and therefore they feel a greater sense of value in themselves. And guess what? They perform at that level.
Right. Yeah. That's because then they're doing it for the team. They're doing it for the family.
And for themselves, because it feels better for all of us.
Yeah.
Right? We all want to feel good. We all want to feel joy. We all want to feel fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right? Don't confuse excitement with fulfillment.
Now, it seems like culturally, certainly in the United States, but you see it in Canada and elsewhere around the world as well, we're pivoting more toward division than we are toward connection.
Absolutely. More than 40% is the latest stat of people in North America identify as lonely most of the time. Nearly half of us.
So what's going wrong?
We're not connecting.
But why? What is it? Politics? Is it, it's not religion anymore. That plays less and less an important role in people's lives.
It depends on where you are. In the States, it certainly is more so than in Canada. Most of my work now is stateside. But
what's dividing people? Is it politics that's dividing people?
For me, it starts with our social media and technology-based culture, right? We are so connected online that we aren't connecting enough in person, and communication online, text-based, just is not the same as verbal or in-person communication. It doesn't work the same way in so many of our lives. Companies, families communicate primarily on these digital text-based platforms, and that just isn't how our brains are wired to best communicate.
Right.
So of course, there's so many things left up to interpretation and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is that we aren't connecting in a deep, meaningful way anymore like we used to. When's the last time that, you experienced your spouse or partner or mother or father come home at the end of the day and say, "Hey, family, I'm home and I'm turning my phone off for the night."
Yeah. Family game night
when does that happen?
Yeah.
Exactly. Family game night. Okay, so what? One night a week we can connect? What about the other 6?
If that, I don't even know if that's a thing anymore.
Right? I know.
Yeah. Do you notice a difference between millennials and older generations, or increasingly now too, we're talking more about younger than millennial generations.
Sure.
Do you notice a difference in how they connect?
Well, Gen Z, which is like they're born on an iPad, right? That seems like today. Yeah. There's definitely a growing disconnect. You'll see older generations that are a little more old school, that are just getting the hang of technology now in some cases, whereas the younger ones are entirely text-based and emoji-based.
Yeah. I think I qualify as an old millennial, which is right on the cusp between two.
Sure, and I'm a young millennial.
Yeah.
I'm right on the cusp of the end of the millennials. So there you go. We're on opposite sides of the same spectrum.
But I notice this it seems to be a huge difference too, and we see this in mental health stats as well, that millennials are more likely than any prior generation to actually talk about how they're feeling and to ask for help, and that seems like a really fundamental building block for connection on its own. There's less of this suck it up, we've all got problems kind of mentality.
Absolutely. Which is why if you dive into those stats deeper, the number one differentiator in terms of a millennial or Gen Z who has more success in life, who has more of a chance of going off to college, who is going to show up to their classes more in college or high school and not experiment with hard drugs, the number one differentiator is whether they have a mentor. And that is someone who is consistently showing up to support them in their life on a one-to-one basis. Yeah. Right. Which is, it makes complete sense when you think about the connection that happens there.
Sure.
When you look at organizations like, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, where there's real connection happening on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So yes, there's definitely a disconnect. There's definitely a difference, but the solution is the same across the board. Right. Something that I've seen in different cultures, crossing all language barriers, socioeconomic backgrounds. It's all the same. What unites us and divides us is the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It all comes down to community, to connection, to finding your tribe or architecting your tribe. And before you can start creating those meaningful connections with others, you have to first connect with yourself, or else you won't even know what you have to offer.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a key in, I think, stigma reduction, which we hear a lot about now, breaking down the stigma of mental health problems and illnesses. And all of the research, all of the science, but all the common sense, too, I think, points to the idea that contact-based education, getting to know people, is the best way to not be afraid of them.
Absolutely. And, you're going to see the benefits surrounding that in all different other situations, because when we're able to flip that switch and leave this kind of archaic, factory-based mindset that has now been molded right into this expedited technological world we're living and moving towards, when we're able to celebrate the humanity and bring the humanity back to the surface, we're talking to people more on a natural everyday basis. We know a little bit more about people. Do they have pets? Are they single? Do they have children? What do they love to do? What's their favorite food when we have our family colleague lunch?
Yeah.
And suddenly you start realizing you're having conversations. You actually start knowing the people you're working with a little better.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to more naturally be able to discuss things like your health, whether it's physical or mental, right? Because you're actually building real connections with people. You have greater relationships.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying how much I'm learning from you today. This is one of the whole reasons I wanted to do this show, was so I could learn some more. But, when I was a teenager, standing on the ledge of a bridge about to end my life, that's what saved me, was the connection with a complete stranger who just happened to be there at midnight, on a Sunday night, who stopped and talked and asked me about my family and my pets and my passions and my interests and my classes. Didn't ask me about my signs and my symptoms and my medications and, if I've taken the Beck depression inventory and what my numbers were. Didn't ask me about any of that, because people had been doing that for years and it wasn't helping. And instead, that was actually killing connection instead of building it and giving me purpose and meaning. So it's so validating to hear you talking about the importance of this now with so many companies.
It's amazing what happens when you flip the conversation and actually see the human being. That's what we're missing. And again, going back to corporate America or corporate Canada, right? Someone's not meeting their quota, right? They haven't reached their quota for sales for the week. Okay, so you're the manager, you call them in. You have two choices. You can either say, "Hey, you didn't miss the quota. You really have to step it up. You're not going to make your commission this week. You gotta do better this week." All right, and you send them back out, or you bring them in and say, "Hey, you didn't meet your quota this week. Are you okay?" Same question, same issue, but you've completely rephrased it. You've completely reframed it, and you're seeing them as a human, not just another rung on your ladder of employees you have to deal with every single day.
Yeah. Well, I hope someday that every company follows the model that you're teaching and that you're building, because I think it would give us a happier, more connected world.
I'm grateful to be one person spreading that message and getting the opportunity to stand on stages preaching it, because it's something I'm wildly passionate about. And it's something that I'm excited more and more companies are starting to realize and celebrate every single day, because they're starting to see the value. Some take longer than others to jump on, but there's no ignoring the humanity within all of us.
Yeah, well, keep preaching, brother. Thanks so much, Shane.
My pleasure.
All right, that's it. That's my conversation with Shane Feldman. You can check him out at shanefeldman.com, or he's not hard to find either. You can Google Shane Feldman and you can find him. For sure, look into his Count Me In movement. It's really inspiring and incredible, and I so enjoyed our conversation together. If you'd like this conversation, if you liked all of our previous ones, if you're looking forward to our future ones, head over to applepodcast.com, subscribe to So-Called Normal, look us up, share us with your friends and family. That's really what helps this show to grow and be as fun as it is. So head over to applepodcast.com and subscribe to So-Called Normal. Leave us a rating and a like and all that stuff, all the nice comments, because I read them all. You can follow me on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever. I'm at Mark Hennick, at MarkHennick, or you can head over to markhennick.com and read more about me and what I do and my speaking engagements. I'm going to get a list of dates up there of some events that I've got coming up. It's a busy year for sure coming up. What else do we got to tell you? Go head over to betterhelp.com/Mark, enter the promo code Mark, M-A-R-K, and you can try out some free, safe, effective, well-trained online psychotherapy. See if you like it. If you've never done it before, or if you don't have the money for psychotherapy, if it's too expensive for you, even though we know that it works, and you want to try it out with a no-risk commitment, go over there, subscribe. If it doesn't work for you, cancel the free trial before it charges you. Just so that way you can see what it's like and get a few free sessions under your belt. That's betterhelp.com/Mark and enter the promo code MARK. I think that's it for me. I'd like to thank the team here at E1, Adrian, Kimberly, Allison, everybody here in Canada and around the world and Entertainment One. My wonderful editor, Dave Trafford, I'd like to thank him as well, of course, for bringing all these things together. I'm Mark Hennick. This has been So Called Normal. Have a good one.